Christian parenting.
This is Cynthia Yanoff, and you're listening to Pardon the Mess. Each week we have honest discussions about the ups and downs of parenting and the lessons God is teaching us along the way. It's real, it's fun, and it's biblical. Life is messy. Don't walk the parenting road alone. Hey guys, it's Cynthia. Welcome to Pardon the Mess. I'm so glad that you are with us. This is part 2 of our 2 parts on politics. Never thought I'd hear myself saying that for sure, but I'm thrilled that we had Jen Dennison speak in part 1, and he talked to us about everything from whether or not God's judgment is on our country to why there is such incivility surrounding our election process. We talk about how to parent it well and teach our kids respect of authority. And it was really, really a strong word from him. And so I hope you'll go back and listen if you missed that. And then part 2 is right now. And we are having Jeff and Becky Leach on the show talking to us about what it's like from an insider perspective. Jeff Leach is a state representative for the state of Texas, and he and his wife feel called into public service. And so although he intended to go to seminary and was going to be a preacher, the Lord sent him to law school and to politics, and he is just living his witness there. And so they're going to talk to us about how we can pray for our leaders, what it's like in the middle of the process right now, how they're raising their kids through this, and how they speak to their kids about our political system. And so it's really practical and encouraging, but I love at the end where they just talk about finding your place of influence. Get outside of what's comfortable, and whatever that looks like. It's probably not politics for many of us, but some it may be, but being willing to live in your highest margin for the Lord in that. So it's a great word from Jeff and Becky Leach. I'm glad they're with us today. Thanks for joining us on part 2 of our 2-part series, Talking Politics on Pardon the Mess. Jeff and Becky Leach, thanks for being on Pardon the Mess today.
Hi, Cynthia.
Hey,
how are you?
I'm good. I'm glad you're here. And I'm just going to start this out and never chatted with you before, but I feel like we should. We live in the same area and we have a lot of the same friends, but I don't know you. And so for anyone who's listening that is wondering, I think whenever we talk in the political realm, people think there's an agenda. And so I'm going to tell y'all up front, not only is there no agenda, but I'm super not political. I know that sounds funny. And so to the extent anyone's listening or y'all are listening or I say something dumb or you're like, wow, that was an agenda point, let's chalk it up to stupidity or just not knowing more than having some agenda. Is that cool?
That sounds great.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, I'm glad that you guys are willing to do this with us today. I would love just, Jeff, tell us a little bit about your background. Kick us off and then we'll go from there and y'all can both kind of tell us what's going on in the world a little.
Sure. Well, thanks for having us today. It's really, really great to be with you. And of course, to sit side by side with my beautiful wife here and talk about what we do and what we believe and what motivates us. And I've been looking forward to this for a while. So thanks for having us. The Reader's Digest version of our story, because really my story is our story together. We're both born and raised here in the area, met when we were in middle school at Prestonwood, our church here locally. And I like to say we were raised together, although she moved around quite a bit. And the Lord blessed me by allowing her to be my high school sweetheart. And the rest is history. We went to Baylor together, got married, went to law school. I've had 3 kids since then. And the Lord has expanded our ministry and grown our influence. And through great times and through the mountains and the valleys has led us down this political path. The politics is an unfortunate reality of this business. We're called to public service. Mm-hmm. And I strongly believe that every Christian is called to public service. And that means maybe running for office, certainly voting, taking part in the culture, in the American experience, and in our shaping our future. So I don't know, that's a very brief Reader's Digest version of our story.
That's a good thumbnail. Okay, so yeah, we should be best friends because I went to Baylor as well, and I also went to law school and met my husband in law school. So there you have it. But okay, and so I agree. I love that you just said it's public service, and let's chalk this up. Let's just kick it off with me saying something stupid. I literally called my husband right before this, and I said, okay, my husband loves politics. He's a poli-sci major, a lawyer now, but he is always watching all things politics. And I go, okay, I need a quick review. is it derogatory to refer to him as a politician? And he's like, no. And I'm like, isn't it sad that in this day and age, I had to ask that question?
It's interesting he says that, because I would actually tell you it's not derogatory, but I don't want to be seen as a politician. Like I said, unfortunately, the reality is so much of what we do is political, but God didn't call us to be political animals. I'm talking Becky and I to just go do politics. God called us to the halls of government to serve people. And just the political side of it is, like I said, an unfortunate reality of the business we're in.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Even recently, because, it's campaign season right now. Recently, he was saying, I'm tired of the politics of it all. So he just wants to serve the people and meet with people, hear their problems and find out solutions, whether or not they agree on everything or not. And so, there's a lot of that our world is lacking right now, is just the service part of it as opposed to the political and the power part of it.
Right.
I feel like I was called into ministry. We're all called into ministry as believers, but I went into Baylor as a religion major, wanting to come out a pastor and wanting to graduate a pastor. And I came out a political science major, I guess, wanting to be a politician, but my calling hasn't changed. My vocation has. Mm-hmm. And that's how we try to view it, not only I as the candidate, but us as a family.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like there should be some good jokes like about that. Like a student goes in to be a preacher and comes out. I just feel like there should be a joke in there somewhere. But yeah, well, that's awesome. And so you're a state rep, right? Let's make sure we get this right. A state rep, Texas.
I serve in the Texas House of Representatives for House District 67 in Collin County, just north of Dallas, suburb of Dallas.
Okay. And so let's talk, Cynthia, though. When we first decided to run, which was what, 8 or 9 years ago, I didn't know what a state rep was.
Well, that's a great point. I actually do know that, which is shocking because I may have failed in government. I can't remember. I'm sure they taught me in law school. But let's just back it up and real quick tell us, Becky, tell us exactly what we're talking about before we get broader picture.
Right. Well, so there's the federal government, which is congressmen and senators, and they're all in Washington. So they represent you, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, they represent you here. And so their district is way bigger. And I know that Jeff could tell you the numbers, but that doesn't really matter. But then there are the people, the senators and the representatives that represent you in Austin for the state level. And then you have the city councilmen and your mayors and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And to be honest, what I didn't realize, because I had always gone in and, voted for the, presidential elections, that your state representatives and your state senators and even your city councilmen and your mayor, that affects your daily life way more than the federal government does. So that's why it's just so important. I think people are starting to pay attention to that kind of stuff way more than they used to because of the environment that we're in right now. But I just think it's important to, note that.
Jeff, is that weird just to hear your wife describing? I mean, do y'all do interviews together a lot? Are you like, wow, now look at this?
Not as often as I wish. Yeah, not as often as I wish we could. But yeah, look, we're called into this together, and it's a hard position to be in at times because of the political reality of where our country is today. Things are so divided. We try to rise above it, but oftentimes we get pulled into get pulled into the political side of it. It doesn't change our convictions or our calling or the way we treat people. But I've always said that the day that Becky or any of my 3 kids came to me and said, "Dad, we're done with this. We want out. We want you to be done. We want you to stop going to Austin. I'm done." They're the most important thing to me. I say this often, and it sounds a little bit cliche, but I mean it sincerely. I serve at home here as dad to prepare my kids for the world, and I serve in the Texas House to prepare the world for them. And that's really the way we view our role as a Texas state representative, is to make sure that our kids have the same opportunities, the same religious liberties, the same freedoms that we had growing up here in the great state of Texas and in this awesome country, which all of us are blessed to live in. That's what we're called to do, is to leave it better than we found it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so how old are your kids?
12, 9, and 5, almost 12, 10, and 6.
All right. So you got a full house. Yeah. Okay. And so let's talk just generally. I think that it's important. We're a parenting podcast, as you know. Let's talk about politics and how that plays in our families. And it's funny, I was at lunch with a very good friend the other day, and she said, "How do you talk to your kids about politics?" Because I find myself wanting to rant when certain things happen or go on. And she's like, and I know that's not from the Lord. And we were talking, and I said, it's interesting. I try to always address issues versus people in my house and talk about the issues that are important in our family, the biblical worldview. But the other thing I do a lot is just avoid it altogether. That tends to be my go-to, is just like, ugh. But they are going to be educated on politics. They are hearing things. Our kids are all out in the real world. And whether you live in a conservative state, a liberal state, whether you fall either way in that direction, your kids are getting educated, and they can either be educated by you or in the real world. And so speaking into it, what's important, and I know your kids are still younger, but as you're bringing them up in it, they're getting a different perspective because of what you both do occupationally. But what's important for our kids to know as we're facing an election? What would you want to speak into your kids if you weren't in the business, if they didn't know as much as they do? What's important that we talk to them about?
I think the number one thing, and you kind of touched on it, that we like to say in our house, and we've said it no matter who is elected, is to respect authority. So God is in control of who is elected, whether it's the person that we voted for or not. And so we don't have to like what they do, and we don't have to like what they stand for, but we can respect their authority. We don't talk ugly, or we try not to talk ugly about people in our house as people. Our kids, for better or worse, have been exposed to a lot more sooner than they probably should, just issues wise. And Brady, who's in 7th grade, he has been watching the news. They watch the news at school. And so in the morning, and so he'll come home and he'll say something to Jeff, and Jeff's like, that's not right. So what you said is really correct. And I think there are a lot of parents, a lot of our friends, who do want to avoid the topic, but they are hearing about it. So either we can have the conversations that are uncomfortable, that are hard, that are difficult, that our kids might eventually not agree with us on, or we can let them be educated by their teachers in the world. That's kind of how I feel.
Yeah, it's important for Christians in their homes to talk about, of course, our biblical worldview. It's important for us as parents, also for our kids to understand what we believe, what Scripture teaches us, why we believe it, and but also to talk about institutions that are formed by God to play a role in the ultimate eternal kingdom. You've got, of course, the family, the institution of the family, of course, the church, and then God formed the institutions of government. And all three of those, they cannot exist without the other. If the family collapses, our governments and our churches will collapse. If the church, of course, if there's no church, you can kiss godly government goodbye. And so they all work together, and our kids understanding the importance of those institutions, how God can use each of those to strengthen righteousness and justice, and to preserve a culture where, like we said, religious liberties are safeguarded. Can't tell you how concerned I am in this country right now. And this is not a Republican or Democrat issue. This is just the reality of the future of our faith here. And the very real possibility that our kids could face real substantive persecution for wanting to share their faith at school, for wanting to go to church, raise their families as we believe Scripture teaches us. So I think just talking about those things in our home, not Republicans or Democrats, not watching MSNBC and Fox News all the time, but talking about what Scripture teaches us and what our role is to love our neighbors and to protect what I believe is the most exceptional country in the history of the world.
I think another thing that we try to harp on, especially right now with the political climate being the way that it is we can love people that we disagree with.
Absolutely.
So our neighbors on the street who don't agree with us, who might not vote for Jeff, but we can love them and have them over for dinner and hang out, And I think...
Who's not voting for me? No,
do you want me to call them?
Yeah. We're trying to teach them, because I think that's really important for them to learn, a skill for them to learn as a believer, as a young believer, for them to be able to love people that think differently and come from different backgrounds and believe differently than they do. And so that, I think, of course, is above all the most important.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it says like in Romans 13 that we're to be subject to the governing authorities. And so we also understand that give God what's God, Caesar's what's Caesar's. There's lots of instances in the Bible where it speaks into it. There's also lots of instances where we see people in the Bible that were subject to a government that was not godly, to rulers that were completely out of whack, right? So I guess when we speak it's just a good opportunity to speak into our kids, like God can use anyone, whether they're a Christian, not a Christian, we agree, whether they're on whatever side of the party that we agree or disagree with, God's using people in real ways. And ultimately his hand is over all things. So I guess what I would wonder is, how would you speak into your kids, or how do you speak into them about disagreeing well? Because we all disagree with people, and how do we disagree well? And I think a lot of that's that we're just rooted in love, because that's who we are as Christians. But how do we do that well, especially in such a politically divisive country at the moment?
Yeah, I think it's a balance. I mean, we of course there are certain issues, core convictions we have that we will not compromise on, because God doesn't compromise on the right to life and the institution of the family. There are certain issues that we believe so strongly on that our foundation is firm on those issues. As Becky said, doesn't mean we're not kind and loving to people with whom we disagree. But today, the reason I think our country is where we are so divided is because we've lost the ability to reach prudent compromise on a whole host of other issues, whether it's healthcare, immigration, taxation, criminal justice reform policy. And it's almost like I think Becky put it really well. If you have an R or a D behind your name, you don't feel like you can talk anymore or break bread together or pray together or go to church together. And that is not biblical. That is, I believe it's sinful to avoid people with whom we disagree politically. And it's just silly. It's easier said than done. It's easy for us to sit here and talk about majoring on the majors and compromise, but we found it to be an incredible opportunity to share the love of Christ by seeking out people with whom we disagree on some of the major issues, but finding issues that we do agree on and working arm in arm, hand in hand with them to advance liberty and freedom and justice and righteousness on those issues.
Because I think that there are certain issues like the ones that Jeff mentioned where you're probably not going to get anywhere having a debate with someone one-on-one, just a one-off debate. And so the best thing you can do is look for the things you do agree on and start from there. And then as you build a relationship with someone, then maybe you can have more of those, meaty discussions where you might disagree, but then you can kind of take and pull from the good arguments that they have. I think one of the things that has gotten us to where we are today is we're afraid to learn from each other. And I don't know why that is. And I kind of feel like as parents, we need to be teaching our kids to know why they believe something, as opposed to just saying, oh, well, my parents told me to vote this way, or my parents told me to believe this thing. Mm-hmm. They need to have their own reasons and their own convictions. Hopefully they're similar to ours, but we also want to learn from them. And I think sometimes we are afraid, first of all, admit that we're wrong or could be wrong or maybe possibly be wrong. And we're closed off to other opinions.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like what you're saying too. I think that being able to speak, to address the issues with our kids, like my daughter asked us straight up one time, like, why do we tend to vote with this particular party? And I was like, I don't know that we've ever talked about that, but then going through the issues, some of the social issues involved and why. But the other thing is telling her, like you're saying, like we've told her, especially with judges and coming from the legal background, like we vote on either side of the ballot, depending on who the person is, what they stand for, but there's those core issues, and God speaks into core issues. And so take the people out, take all the whatever that's divisive. God's word speaks into core issues. And so some of those core issues that, we look at, like you were mentioning, like right to life in our house, some of those things that we're looking at, I think just having that worldview for them, that biblical worldview, teaching them that, I think you can do a whole lot without ever mentioning a name or a party, but somehow we miss that along the way. I don't know.
Yeah, the next generation of Americans, the polls show us, if they're anything, there are two things. Number one is they're increasingly becoming non-denominational, and so while we may be raising Christian children, they, much less than us or our grandparents, are affiliating with Baptist or Methodist or Lutheran or Catholic. They want to love Jesus and lose the labels. Same thing is true politically. We're raising a generation of students, and I actually think this is a good thing, a generation of Americans that aren't necessarily identifying as R or D. My grandparents, some of the godliest people I've ever known in my life, from West Texas, they were yellow dog Democrats, but they would be Republicans today. But I know a lot of great godly people that vote Democrat today, and same Republicans. So I'm encouraged to know that the next generation of Americans is being taught to think We need thinking Christians who think deeply about these issues and seek after God and His Word and truth, absolute truth on these issues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just praying for the people also that serve. You're serving people in the state of Texas, which runs typically a little more conservative, but we have people that are called all over this country to Christians that love the Lord, that are called into public service. And it's a hard place to be. I assume on every level, it's a hard spot to be. Hey guys, today's podcast is sponsored by our friends at Faithful Counseling. Is there something interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your goals? Faithful Counseling is a solution for people seeking traditional mental health counseling who'd prefer to hear from a Christian perspective. Faithful Counseling will assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. It's not a crisis line, it's not self-help, it's professional counseling done securely online. You can log into your account anytime and send a message to your counselor. You'll receive timely and thoughtful responses, plus you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions. It's more affordable than traditional online counseling, and financial aid is available. Faithful Counseling wants you to start living a happier life today. Go to faithfulcounseling.com/pardonthemess for 10% off your first month. Again, that's faithfulcounseling.com/pardonthemess. And join the over 500,000 people taking charge of their mental health with the help of experienced professionals. What's your encouragement just in praying for our leaders? And I think with our kids, because I'm going to be honest with you, I don't remember ever, maybe, dare I say this, praying for our political leaders with my kids. And so I think that's something we're missing. What's your encouragement on that?
I don't think we should be afraid. In fact, that's probably not putting it the right way. I think we should be eager in our homes to talk about why America is great, why I believe our country is exceptional. I believe that it was founded by, there's no question, it was founded by men and women who love Jesus. 55 of the 57 signers of the Declaration of Independence were active members in their church, many of them full-time ministers. Our founding documents, our country is founded on Judeo-Christian values. It was founded by people who weren't allowed to practice their religion and pursue Christ, and they literally risked everything, their fame, their fortune, their lives, to found America. We need to talk about that with our kids. We also need to talk about how previous generations of Americans, they didn't just have to vote. They literally gave their lives defending freedom here on our shores and all across the world. Our grandparents, some of those, we need to talk about how voting is the very least we should do, and praying for our leaders just goes hand in hand with that. The best thing someone can tell me when I'm on the campaign trail or out in the community is, hey, I'm praying for you. And I have a lot of people who say, hey, I didn't vote for you, but I'm praying for you. And it means the world to me. It really does.
I think if you're asking specifically how you can pray, I think right now during campaign season, you can pray for rest, because everyone gets really weary, and then that makes everything just 10 times worse. Mm-hmm. So rest, like good sleep, and just protection. There's a lot of mudslinging going on, if you have noticed.
Well, I don't know what you're talking about.
I don't know. And so, a lot of times it hits you and it's fine, but then sometimes it just hits the wrong spot. And so just protection. And I think, God's strength and his wisdom as you continue to move through and just for the right people. I mean, that God's hand would just direct the country in the way that it should go, because right now it's feeling really, he's talking about how great it is, and I think it is great, but it feels really heavy at the same time.
Yeah, I think it feels heavy for all of us, and that's why you tend to I don't know, it seems easier to bury your head. But I just love one other point I wanted to talk to you all about, that I think that when you're called into something, and you wanted to be a preacher, a lot less controversial, by the way, and then the Lord led you sometimes I guess. Yeah. Led you a completely different direction. But the Lord's calling Christians into the hard places, and to places that are not glamorous. You don't do what you do because you definitely don't do it for the money or the leisure, I'm assuming, but you do it because it's a calling on your life and your family. And Becky, you too have an organization. I know that you, based on some things in your past, you also have a calling where you're advocating. Tell us just a little bit about that, and just encourage us. I think you're both an encouragement. Just if there's something that you've worked, something in your life where the Lord's spoken into, or a hard place you've lived, like, get out there and be an advocate. Let's make a difference, because someone's going to speak into the topic. Let it be Christians.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that we, as a culture of Christians, or as a Christian culture, have gotten really comfortable being comfortable. And that's why I think this whole year 2020 has become such a big deal, because we've had to get uncomfortable, whether like God's forced us to be uncomfortable this year. And so I think he has written stories for each of us that a lot of times we think are insignificant or unusable or less than or not good enough or not noteworthy at all. And I feel like that is exactly the opposite of what the Bible teaches us. God teaches us that every moment has basically been written into the fabric of what he wants to do with our life. And, when we were called to public service, I didn't want to say yes to that. I mean, you didn't want to say yes. I mean, there were days where we said no, we flat out said no. And then 4 days later we came back together because we hadn't been sleeping, and we were like, I guess we should start praying about this, shouldn't we? And so that was a whole long road of God providing. And then in 2018, I decided to dive into my story. So I was in middle school and high school. I was repeatedly molested. I experienced childhood sexual abuse. And I had never told a soul. I had never told Jeff and I, like he said, we had started dating when we were 16 years old, and he didn't know. My family, my parents or my mom didn't know. I decided, for many reasons that I won't dive into right here, decided to finally deal with it and acknowledge it. And as a result, we had a really difficult year, but also it was full of redemption and God showing us how he can rebuild Jeff and I's relationship, our family, and how he can redeem even the darkest of places in our life. And he can use that for his glory and to redeem others if we're just willing to get uncomfortable for a second and use it, and willing to speak life into those hard places. And so we are extremely passionate about seeing other believers get uncomfortable for the cause of Christ. And however we can do that, whether that's just saying, this is what we're doing, or praying for you, or coming alongside you, that's what we are totally about. And we want to see a revival of Christians working, not just for the Lord, but for their communities and for the betterment of other believers.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, y'all are both it's an inspiration, because I think how you're saying it is so good. It's willing to get uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable even talking about politics, as we talked about at the beginning, wondering what ridiculous thing I'm going to say, but I'm glad that we're doing this, because I think what we need to realize, I think as parents, you don't know who you're raising. I don't know who I'm raising. I don't know what God has planned for them. I doubt that your parents, maybe they had some big aspirations for you, Jeff, to be in politics, but I'm guessing they didn't. I bet your grandparents never saw this coming, at least how it looks now, but we don't know. And so whatever it looks like, let's just do it well for our kids now. Let's speak truth in the tough areas that we face with our country, and then just being willing to advocate in the hard places in our life, like what you're doing, Becky, and going and advocating on behalf of people. It's stepping out there, getting uncomfortable. So it's a great word. I'm going to give y'all the last word. Anything else you want to add in?
Yeah, I'll just add this, and I'll tell you the pollsters and my consultants, my staff, my experts, they would say, don't say this, which means I'm going to say it.
Awesome.
If your listening audience believes that the answers to this country lie in politicians, then your hope is in the wrong place. We play a role. We all play a role. But if this country is going to be saved and strengthened for future generations and continue to be a light, proverbial city on a hill, the change is going to come from the church. Mm-hmm. And we need the church, pastors and people, to not be spectators, but to get into the arena, to not be consumers, but to be committed patriots, to help us strengthen this country, Republicans and Democrats, just people of faith that say, I've had enough. I'm tired of this, and we're going to step out. We're going to love on people. We're going to stand for righteousness. That's what's going to save America, not politicians or pundits. That would be my encouragement to you, is to ask God to show you what your role is, and then to do it faithfully.
And at a minimum, pray and vote. But I love that. Don't be spectators.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you guys are awesome. And hey, real quick, what does it look like for you? We're taping this in September for everyone listening, but we're probably releasing this in October. What does it look like for you, right, as we're coming into the heart of the election?
Yes, so I'm on the ballot every 2 years. We're on the ballot every 2 years, so I'll be on the ballot with the president and our United States senators and congressmen. I'll be a little further down the ballot, but
lots of traveling, I assume?
Lots of traveling right now around the district. So just locally, normally I'm in Austin when we're not in a pandemic. I'm in Austin a lot across the state, quite a bit, multiple times a month. But like Becky said, there's been little silver linings, little blessings along the way during this crisis. And one of them is I haven't traveled in 6 months, which has just been.
Our kids have gotten spoiled.
Yeah. And I know there's a lot of people who haven't had that, a lot of people who've lost jobs and are in a really difficult economic time and healthcare crisis. And let me say this, we're here for you. The best part of my job is serving and helping folks like that. So if there's anything I can do for your viewers or listeners, let me know.
And how do people catch up with you? And by the way, Becky writes for Christian Parenting. So if you're not receiving our emails, you should be. She has another one coming up. But yeah, so you can find her there. But how do people catch up with you if they just want to kind of follow along or see what's up with y'all?
Yes, so you can go to, I have a website. It's jeffleach.com. What's your website?
Becky Leach.
BeckyLeach.com.
Very original.
Mine's jeffleach.com, JEFFLEACH. And if people really do want to get in touch with me directly, my personal email and my personal cell phone are there on my website. This cell phone right here. So some politicians get out their cell phone, but they've got like 4 or 5 cell phone numbers. They've got burner phones. This is the only one I have. So if you want to get in touch with me, call me anytime.
Awesome. All right. We'll be praying for you guys. Thank you so much for spending a few minutes with us.
Thanks. God bless y'all.
All right, you guys, we did it. We made it through our discussions on politics. This is just important. And I kind of make a joke about it that it does make me uncomfortable, but I also know that it's important. We've got to be able to speak into social issues, and we've got to be able to be relevant as believers, especially in our homes with our kids. And so a huge thanks to Jeff and Becky Leach for being here, especially during campaign time. It's crazy for them, I know. So let's just pray over them. If you'll take a minute and pray for them, just that their family will just feel rest and completely intact as they make it across the finish line of this election. But then let's pray for all of our leaders. Let's pray for our kids and our families as we digest and process this. And more than anything, let's just always put our witness above our political beliefs. I think that's so critical right now. I'm praying for you guys. I'm praying for all that's going on with this election, and I am thankful that you're here today. We know your days are busy, so as always, thank you for joining us as we pardon the mess.